Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to talk about some absolutely twisted movies that you can currently watch on Netflix. So this list is going to feature kind of a range of stuff. I've got a couple little sci-fi movies, some very dark movies, and they're all sort of hidden gem level movies or ones that you likely have not heard about, with maybe a couple of exceptions. So there should be some good picks on this list. I'll be sure to try to temper them and let you know which ones might be most appropriate for you. This video is sponsored by CyberGhost VPN. Later in the video, I'll explain how they can help you unlock even more movies using your current Netflix subscription. But let's go ahead and start with my number 10 pick, Berlin Syndrome. Now, this is about a young girl who's traveling on her own and doesn't get quote unquote taken in the traditional sense. She meets a guy that she really likes, yet comes to find out his apartment is basically a dungeon. It's break-proof glass, there's a giant bolt on the door, and she can't escape. And she's stuck there for quite a while and sort of develops a relationship with this guy. So it's very dark in that respect, but you basically are dealing with this young woman who is just trapped and cannot figure out how to get out. This feels a little bit old school to me. It's fairly slow paced. If you're interested in the setup on this one, you'll probably be interested in the movie because it's well acted, it's well produced. There's just not a whole lot going on here that I didn't already describe. So if it doesn't interest you, you're not gonna unlock, secrets with this one. Now my next pick has a lot in common with Berlin Syndrome, but it's got something different about it that makes it a lot better. In addition to that, there's a way better cast, just kind of a bigger cast, more interesting cast, and it's done a little bit more artistically, which I think adds a little bit of interest as well. This one's called Elizabeth Harvest, and it was only just recently added to Netflix. This is about, again, a young woman, yet here she marries a much older man, an extremely wealthy man, and as she's moving into this amazing sort of teched out house, she discovers there is one room she's not allowed to go in. You already know she's gonna go in, yet what she finds in there is what really sets this one off and makes it so interesting. I was surprised at how much I like this one. This one's not as slow paced as Berlin Syndrome. It's a little bit slow in the first, 15, 20 minutes, and then I just found it to be really interesting. It's a nice little surprise hiding out on Netflix right now, but keep in mind, these are all twisted movies, and this one's got some very dark elements to it. Now, this is such a strong list that my number 8 pick has made the number 1 slot on lists in the past, and that is The Invitation. This is one of my favorite little movies that I've discovered on Netflix over the years. In fact, it has a lot in common with one of my honorable mentions, but it does everything so much better, which is why it actually makes the list. This is about a guy who goes to a dinner at his ex-wife's house, which is an awful idea to begin with, in my opinion, but when he gets there, everyone's acting very strange, very culty, and the movie does an excellent job, just expert job of keeping you guessing as to whether or not he is losing his mind and maybe he's imagining things or maybe there's something actually going on. That's a very tricky little magic trick of a thing to pull off in a movie, and The Invitation nails it. They nailed it so good that I'm able to tell you that, and it still doesn't ruin the surprises hidden in this movie. Now, my next pick is not a good movie, but it is a ton of fun, which is why it makes this spot, and it was also just recently added to Netflix. It's called We Summon the Darkness. This is a B-level horror movie. That's all it is. This is the type of movie that they used to do Mystery Science Theater 3000 about, but it's really well done in that vein. It's cheesy, it's silly, it's stupid at times, but the characters in it have a ton of fun. They kind of chew up the scenery a little bit. They're really sort of enjoying these kind of weird roles, and I liked it. I liked everything about it. I think the filmmakers set out to make a movie like that. They did several things that only those movies seem to do, and they nailed it. They created what they set out to do, and I loved it for that because I'm kind of a geek for those kinds of shitty movies anyway. And to see someone sort of do such a good job of making one on purpose was a lot of fun to watch. I did a much more in-depth review on this one for channel members. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, just click the join button and see if it's maybe for you. But let's go ahead and move on with the rest of the list. Now, I told you these were twisted, and my next pick is one of the most fucked up movies on this list. Also, recently added to Netflix is What Keeps You Alive. This is about a lesbian couple who are running out in the woods when the awful stuff's happening. I'm trying not to give too much away. The reason I even mentioned that they are a lesbian couple, it's not that relevant to the story other than the fact that you get sort of this like woman against woman thing that it's not the first time it's ever happened in a movie, but sort of in this genre where someone's like running for their life. You don't see it very often, and I thought it added a little bit of a different tinge to this one that worked. This one even tried to go in some really wild territory with some almost like psychedelic stuff that I don't think quite worked. The movie sort of dips its toe in that water, which is fine, but as far as just running for your life through the woods movies go, which there are quite a few of those, What Keeps You Alive is pretty exceptional, and I was surprised by it. Now that said, if you're in another country and maybe you don't have access to all of these movies, you should take a look at CyberGhost. There's a link in the description, and right now, my viewers can sign up for as low as $2.75 a month. That's less than $3 a month to use this VPN service that is going to allow you to access more movies with your current Netflix subscription. In addition to letting you do that, it's a VPN service. It keeps your browsing secure and safe. If that's not enough for you, they have a 45-day money-back guarantee and great 24/7 customer support in case you need any help. It will work on up to 7 devices simultaneously. I don't know who's going to use it on 7 simultaneously, but you can do it, and it's all the types of devices you normally use. When using CyberGhost, they have specialized servers in different countries, and you just select. You can switch the servers. That way you're now watching Netflix in Germany. And no, it's not just German movies. They have big budget American movies too that we don't even have here on Netflix. But jumping around on the different servers is going to allow you to watch way more movies without even having to mess with your Netflix account. And it costs less than $3 a month, depending on which package you pick, which is less than a movie rental, and you can watch way more stuff. So it'll help you save money on top of just keeping everything secure. Okay, now we're in the top 5, and my number 5 pick has some super dark themes, and it has themes in common with Catcher in the Rye and The Telltale Heart. It's called Super Dark Times. This takes place in the 90s, and the 90s vibe is going to appeal to anyone who was a teenager in the 90s. There's a lot of elements there for you, but what this is really about is some teenage boys who get into some trouble. They do something horrible by accident and they try to cover it up, and things just continue to get worse and worse. I don't want to say too much more than that, but this one, not only is it just dark-natured almost throughout with almost no levity except for maybe a few little jokes in the beginning, it's really kind of sticky. So be careful with this one, especially we're still under quarantine. If you feel like you can handle something pretty grim, this is one of the more grim ones on the list because there's just not any real relief in it. It includes some nightmare sequences that I think are subtle but incredibly effective, and it's surprisingly bloody too. I'm not going to say much more than that. It is going to surprise you. It's not going to seem like that type of movie when you start watching it, and once it gets going, it really sort of gets under your skin. Okay, another sci-fi pick on the list, and I know you're wondering, we didn't talk about sci-fi picks, but one of the movies I talked about previously is sort of secretly a sci-fi movie. Have fun trying to figure out which one that is, but The Platform is very clearly a sci-fi movie. This is the least hidden Jimmy one on the list because it did so well, so many people loved it. It is foreign language, it is dubbed, although I didn't think the dubbing was particularly great on this one, but it is about this prison where this platform lowers down and is covered in food, yet you're left eating whatever the people above you didn't eat. And the more that the characters spend time in this prison, the more they start to realize sort of how deep this prison goes. It's obviously very metaphorical, but it works really well, and it's a great piece of entertainment. And additionally, it's very interesting and has this great metaphor element too. I know there's some people that have some gripes with this movie, but even if you have a gripe with a particular moment, the overall experience is just something really cool and different, especially to just be like a Netflix original. Now, my next pick is another Netflix original Spanish language movie, but the dubbing is quite good on this one. It works really well. If you want to try that, I highly recommend checking out The Occupant. Now, this one, again, feels kind of old school. It's got this old school thriller element to it that I loved. And this one gets really grim too. I mean, I'm telling you, these are twisted movies, but this is about a guy who's like a high-powered marketing executive, has this incredible life, and it's taken from him. He loses his job, he loses his house, and he figures out how to sort of wedge his way into the people that bought his dream home. And things just go crazy from there. I loved this one. The character was so interesting. I had a hard time figuring out where he was coming from, which is normally kind of an issue in storytelling, but in this particular story, that's what made it so interesting, is I was like, what is this guy doing the whole time? And I loved it. I was another one for a Netflix original, just pleasantly surprised by it. Okay, now before my top two, I want to give you a couple of honorable mentions. In case you've seen some of the ones on this list, you get a couple of bonus recommendations off of this list. One BR, or One Bedroom, was also recently added to Netflix, and it has a lot in common with The Invitation, but it's also very different at the same time. This is about a young girl who moves to LA. She moves into an apartment building and notices some weird things going on with the other people that live in the building. And then things take a very dark turn and the movie never looks back. Basically, there's a twist early on that sets up the movie, and I cannot tell you anything about it. The only reason this one doesn't actually make the list is because I felt like the picks on this list were so strong, and this one felt like it borrowed from a lot of other movies that I liked maybe a little bit too much, and the quality was a little bit lower, but this easily would have been my number 11 pick on this list. And then I'd like to also mention The Perfection. It's been a while since I mentioned it on the channel. I think it's one of the more twisted Netflix original movies. It fits right in with the other picks on this list. If you've never seen it, I recommend it. It's weird, it's wild, it's confusing, but it ultimately worked in the end. Another just surprise of a Netflix original movie. I love when they're able to pull that off. The Perfection did it. I loved it. This one really belongs somewhere in the middle of this list, probably even in the top 5, but I've mentioned it too many times on the channel before for it to make the official list, but I'm mentioning it here. Now, that said, let's move on with the number 2 pick on this list, which is from South Korea. And this one, I'm not going to be able to tell you much. This is really going to be for people who trust my recommendations on movies. You are going to have to read subtitles. The movie is fairly slow, but it's very well done. And the reason I can't tell you anything about it is because the way that this is set up, you're learning and figuring out sort of a mystery, reluctantly almost. I guess that's almost too much for me to say, but you're unraveling it along with the main character. And he figures out what's going on in this story fairly slowly, but it's interesting the entire way. If you give this one 30 minutes, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised by just kind of how smart and subtle some of the elements are in this one. It makes the number 2 spot because it's one of the better movies currently on Netflix, and it's certainly a hidden gem. I know a lot of people haven't discovered it yet. Again, if you like my recommendations, this is a strong one from me. And after all that gushing, my final pick, apologies if you don't like foreign movies, I don't do this often, but The Invisible Guest is one of the best movies I've discovered on Netflix, meaning that's the first time I ever saw it was on Netflix, in a long time. I loved this movie. It is also Spanish language, actually features one of the main actors from The Occupant, but this feels like if Alfred Hitchcock was making movies today, this is what they would be like. I mean, the script feels like it came from Alfred Hitchcock. I loved that. My only gripe with this one is there was almost too much going on towards the end. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, I was so excited about how this movie was unfolding. Yet it's very dark. It opens up sort of laying out a murder that took place in a room, or maybe didn't take place in a room, that was completely locked, and there's no way out, that sort of a thing. And then there's so much more that goes on in this movie. I loved it. Another one, if you like my recommendations, watch it. I cannot recommend this one strongly enough, but let me know in the comments below which movies I talked about that you are most looking forward to watching. Let's also take a moment in the comments to thank those Patreon supporters that are helping me produce content like this. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the description, as well as the channel membership link. However you choose to support the channel, it is much appreciated, but I will keep making lists like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this twisted episode, and you will see me on the next one.